Hey everyone. So music is an expensive hobby, right? I mean, if we're gonna go buy like the most basic home recording kit, we're gonna spend like $250. And what I'm referring to are these like bundle packs. The Focusrite Scarlett bundle pack is probably like the most purchased like beginner starting recording pack you can buy. I actually personally bought the Presonus one back in the day that came with like the audio box USB, came with its own like HD7 or I still have them. It came with these. They are broken now, but they lasted a long time. Right, so basically what I'm saying is if you want to get into home recording at the lowest threshold, we're talking like $250. But what if we went even cheaper? What is the lowest threshold of price that we're willing to pay and still get usable audio in return? Well, there's something called the law of diminishing returns, which is kind of on our side in this scenario. Basically, it says the more that we increase in price, we don't necessarily get the same proportional increase in quality. The difference between a $400 microphone and a $4,000 microphone is going to be nowhere the same amount of difference as a $20 microphone and a $400 microphone. So today we're going to see what the cheapest price point is that I think we can get decent audio production quality from. Now obviously this depends a lot on the user. Somebody might just want a decent microphone for teaching online or perhaps recording a podcast. And then somebody who's trying to be a producer and a mixer engineer, they probably have different standards for what their audio is going to sound like. So keeping that in mind, there are no absolute answers to this. These are suggestions that I have, and you can go a bunch of different routes with this. You can upgrade software, you can upgrade hardware, you can upgrade headphones, you can upgrade microphones. It's up to you to decide how you want to go about doing this. Now, at the time of recording this video, I am at like 700 subscribers. I don't have the budget for these kinds of videos, or a budget at all, to go out and buy these things and test them in an A/B comparison. If you subscribe, maybe I can afford to make that video in the future. But for now, we're going to do this all in like a theoretical sort of discussion. If you have any of this gear, please let me know in the comments. We can see if this conjecture is correct, or if you hate your gear. I don't know. So in both the $50 scenario and the $250 scenario, we're going to be working with free software, and there's a bunch of different options for this. To name some of the top picks, we're talking about Studio One Prime, we're talking about Ableton Live Lite, Pro Tools First, Audacity, and GarageBand. Now, of these softwares that are all free, I have three of them that I think you should consider. Ableton Live Lite, Pro Tools First, and GarageBand. This is a really big choice, because this sort of defines your path into musical production in the future. See, all three of these softwares kind of specialize in a certain area. It's a choose your own adventure. It's kind of like picking your first starter Pokemon in, whatever Pokemon game you had as a kid, or, still play. I still play. If you're gonna go with Ableton Live Lite, Ableton is a software that can honestly do anything, but it specializes in electronic production and live performance. So if your goal is to produce EDM, or your goal is to produce something that is primarily in the box, Ableton might be your go-to. Ableton Live Lite is also great because you can use VSTs with it, external VSTs. It's limited to 16 tracks, which is pretty limited, and it's limited to 8 inputs. But again, the fact that you can use external plugins on Ableton Live Lite is a huge advantage for Ableton Live Lite. None of the other ones on this list can do that, except for Audacity. Pro Tools is the OG. It's the first one, and it's the industry standard, and it's extremely good for dealing with audio. Specifically audio. It's not that great for using virtual instruments, in my opinion, but you can do that. In Pro Tools First, you can take advantage of Pro Tools specific plugins inside of it. You're also limited to 16 tracks, and you're limited to 4 inputs. Now, if you're going to go with Pro Tools, you probably want to get involved in a professional recording studio. If you want to work in a professional recording studio, you should learn Pro Tools. But in terms of a home studio environment, Pro Tools is not as friendly as these other DAWs. It's going to be more complicated to work with. It's not going to work as well with other programs. It's kind of picky. It's kind of not very friendly to third-party programs. And genres that are really heavily made in the box, like using software instruments, we're talking EDM, things like that, Pro Tools is not going to be great at that. You can make it. In fact, there's a really comprehensive plugin called Expand that I made a whole synth track with. I can play a part of it right now. But the problem with Expand is it's mostly preset based, and there is not a lot of customization you can do within it, but you can do it. But again, Pro Tools First is if you want to get into Pro Tools because you want to get into a professional recording environment later in life. GarageBand. Why am I mentioning GarageBand? It's like the most basic one. Well, GarageBand is baby Logic Pro. It's extremely intuitive, extremely user-friendly, and unlike the other two programs on this list, you can have unlimited tracks. You have to use the software instruments provided by Apple. You can't use third-party plugins at all, and EQ and compression and all the mixing you can do on GarageBand is extremely limited. Extremely limited. But it's a nice fusion between the audio production of Pro Tools and the electronic-centered productions of Ableton. It kind of fuses them together in a really intuitive, well-constructed way. It's developed by Apple, so you know the UI is going to be crazy intuitive. It's going to run extremely well on Apple hardware because that's what Apple does. So if you get started with GarageBand, you can easily upgrade to Logic Pro. So many producers are using Logic Pro these days. Phineas, Billie Eilish, you know, no big deal. And one thing you should keep in mind is changing a DAW is kind of difficult. Usually I would advise picking one that you like to work within and try not to vary with it too much. You're just going to spend a lot of time trying to learn new software when you could be mixing music. And all of these programs can sort of do similar things. So just pick one and then stick with it and learn it really well. I think this is, of this whole video, choosing your DAW I think is the most important decision. Not as fun as hardware, but still. And Ableton Live Lite is the one I would pick. I prefer Ableton over the other two DAWs I just mentioned. And it's extremely intuitive, just like Logic Pro is. It's super simple to use if you want it to be simple, and if you want to make it complicated, it can get complicated real quick. That's why I think the UI of Ableton is just amazing. Super simple, and then if you want to go deep, you can go deep. Okay, so let's talk about what I think most people are here for, the hardware. So if we're looking at the $50 range, we're talking about USB microphones. I know. Let's talk about the pros of a USB microphone. First off, they're extremely compact, they're extremely affordable, and they're extremely portable. Let's talk about the bad of a USB microphone. They lack upgradability, meaning if you want to upgrade to a new platform, you have to literally buy a completely new setup because the setup is completely contained inside of the microphone itself. They have a tendency to have a really harsh high end, and they tend to hiss and have a really high self noise. These are common complaints that you get with the USB microphone. Oftentimes you'll find that they don't record at the same fidelity, meaning you're not usually going to go above 48K in terms of the sample rate, and you're oftentimes not going to go above 16-bit in terms of the bit depth. We should talk about that in the video at some point. Remind me. And at lower price points, these USB microphones are just going to be bad quality. Like they're just going to break. They're not going to break right away. I mean, a lot of these are really usable, and honestly, you can get really good audio from them, or very usable audio from them. But yeah, their build quality isn't going to be awesome. And in terms of the $50 range for a USB microphone, there's not much to choose from, even though there might seem to be a lot to choose from. In general, I would trust a few companies in this price range: Samson, Mackie, and Blue. It might be tempting to get a Behringer, and Behringer can be extremely usable, but Behringer as a company that might warrant a whole nother video. They walk on this weird ethical line that I personally have a problem with. The microphone I would probably recommend in this price range is the Mackie EM91CU. It's going to be a condenser microphone, and indeed most USB microphones are going to mimic the same qualities as a condenser microphone. The Samson Go mic is really portable and really small and not the worst. The Blue Snowball is a really commonly bought microphone, kind of trendy. Not terrible. The Razer Siren is a pretty usable microphone for $50, and if you want to spend $20 more, you could go with something like the Behringer Bigfoot, which is just a blatant ripoff of the Blue Yeti. So we're going to be pairing one of these $50 microphones with one of the free DAWs I had mentioned before, and then we just need to worry about headphones. Now with headphones, you have some lying around the house, hopefully better than a $5 pair you bought at the Dollar Tree. We're going to be using these. For a lot of people, that's going to mean either, you know, a Bluetooth set, whether it's like AirPods or like some Sony headset, or maybe it's just like the Apple wired headphones. Whatever headphones that you're using to listen to music casually, because you know what a professionally sounding song sounds like whenever you listen in those headphones. This is why reference tracks are kind of a must, working in a limited setup of, you know, this caliber. Because I would trust a really high level production from a song that you love to listen to sitting next to your mix more than I would no mix sitting next to your mix. Whenever you're not working with something that has really high fidelity audio to send back at you, always use a reference track that you know sounds good. You should probably use a reference track anyways, honestly. All right, so let's talk about the hardware with a $250 setup. The first thing you're going to invest in is an audio interface. This is an upgradable platform, meaning you can keep the same audio interface and you can upgrade your microphone or whatever you happen to be using to record and keep the audio interface the exact same. It's going to produce higher fidelity audio with less noise. It's going to keep a lot of these active components outside of the microphone. Again, less noise, less moving parts, and also you're going to actually get into some legit microphones now. Now, if you want to talk about really cool, affordable audio interfaces, my number one choice is the PreSonus 24C. It's really nice and modern. It has nice appointments like a USB-C. It has actual graphic monitoring of like clipping and audio signal levels on the actual interface itself. And I've owned PreSonus hardware in the past. They're just really good at making high quality stuff for a low price. If you want to go cheaper, the Behringer Euphoria series actually has some really impressive stats attached to their interfaces, including preamp gain levels that are actually higher than most other even more expensive audio interfaces. Obviously, the Scarlett series is a really popular one. I have a kind of an upgrade, a Scarlett 18920. It's the one most people go with. It's a nice average. And if you want to spend a little more, the Motu interfaces are premium for this price point. At this price point, I'm recommending everyone get a 57. You could get a lower budget condenser, but as I've said repeatedly in many different videos before, if you're working in an untreated environment and you're working with a $50 or a $250 recording setup, man, get a dynamic. You're going to reject a lot of the noise around you. I cannot tell you how many times my recording is interrupted by the crazy loud street behind me whenever I use a condenser. Now, I could totally recommend to you to get an SM57 and then with the budget that we have left over, like a little bit later in this video, get a low budget condenser as well. You're going to be able to cover a ton of ground with that, but I still think your primary microphone should be an SM57. If you get an SM57, it'll be there when you die. These things will survive forever and you will use them forever. When you buy a 57, you've bought a life partner. You could also swap out that low budget condenser I mentioned earlier with a nice pair of studio headphones. Kind of pick your poison. Choose your own adventure again. I should also mention on your $250 setup, you could opt in to your first paid DAW. That being Reaper. Reaper's great. I've never used it. I have a lot of friends who use it. Extremely powerful for the money, actually. I just think it looks ugly. I don't like the UI. So here's a few $250 setups for your consideration. Behringer Euphoria UMC 202 HD with a Shure SM57 and a pair of Audio-Technica M30Xs. This is pretty similar to my setup. I just have a Scarlett 18920 instead. And man, you could conquer a lot of ground with this sort of setup in mind. I mean, an SM57 could do anything. I love them. You could also take this setup, swap out the headphones, and pick like a Samson CO1 condenser. That way you have a dynamic microphone, a condenser microphone, you have your software because it's free, and you have your interface. Conquer the world. Again, you could do so much with that. I should also mention it in this setup, you can use that Samson CO1 and the SM57 at the same time. Perfect singer-songwriter like setup. Perfect. If you want to opt into a higher quality interface, go ahead and get the PreSonus 24C. That's going to give you better audio quality. It's going to give you a much better build quality with modern accoutrements. It's just going to last longer. It's just going to last longer. With this setup, we could go with a Shure SM57 and a PreSonus 24C. And if you want to go all the way, get all the bells and whistles and, just kind of pay cheaper prices for it and get a little bit cheaper quality, you could get the Behringer Euphoria UM2, which is $45. Then get the Shure SM57, the Audio-Technica M30Xs, and then get the condenser that Behringer makes, the Behringer C1, or if you wanted to get another one, you could get the newer NW800. I've done a whole video on it. You can make good stuff with it. Look, we live in a time where even on this $50 setup, if you're good enough and you can engineer well enough, you can make it sound great. You can legitimately make it sound awesome. And I don't want to fall into this trap of like the YouTubers saying, oh, you don't need gear to make good gear. You want to see the setup I'm using right now? I don't own this camera. This is my school's camera that I'm renting. And I'm going to pop into my camera here. Look at my room. These are just, I took all the lamps in my room. And that's my lighting setup. So I don't have fancy gear either, man. Making do with what we got. No fancy gear yet. Okay, that was all. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful. If you do want to purchase any of these products, I'll have the affiliate link in the comment section down below. That's how this channel makes money for the time being. So it's a great way to support the channel if you enjoyed it. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Follow me on Instagram at RealAudioHaze if you're interested in lessons. I'll put my qualifications up on the screen. You can email me at realaudiohaze@gmail.com, all lowercase. And that's all. I'll see you in the next video.